Hello, football fans. As you know, this is your host, Mateo, with the WCC Grid Talk. And I am here to provide you with Week 17 highlights and what this means going into the final week of the NFL regular season. So, to start off, let's lead in with the AFC. And there's a lot of interesting things that are currently taking place in the AFC, most notably with the AFC South and the AFC East, okay? And let's start off with the AFC South right now because currently there are three teams, the Jacksonville Jaguars, the Indianapolis Colts, and the Houston Texans, who are all tied up at 9-7. And the Jacksonville Jaguars are currently holding the lead with that number 4 spot. Now, Jacksonville has an opportunity to hold on to that number 4 seed with a win over the Tennessee Titans in Week 18. But if they end up losing that matchup against the Tennessee Titans, there is a battle, Indianapolis Colts versus the Houston Texans for the AFC South title. So there are a lot of interesting things that are still taking place. And on top of it all, there is still another team that is looking to make their way into the playoffs. With their win over the Seattle Seahawks, the Pittsburgh Steelers are still in the hunt. If Jacksonville was to end up losing that game against the Tennessee Titans and Pittsburgh was to win their matchup, Pittsburgh would then move up in the wildcard race and put themselves into the postseason. There really are a lot of different scenarios that could potentially end up taking place. Now, the other thing is the AFC East, okay? Because next Sunday, we are going to have a huge battle for the AFC East title. Buffalo Bills versus the Miami Dolphins. Winner of that matchup takes the AFC East. This is just what we had predicted. We had predicted that this scenario was going to actually end up taking place, and it's going to make for some interesting Week 18 football. And I, for one, can't wait for it. As it currently stands in the AFC, though, right now, Baltimore went ahead and secured their number 1 seed with the first round bye. Miami is still up for grabs for that number 2 seed, depending on their game versus the Buffalo Bills. Kansas City is holding on to that number 3 spot, and then Jacksonville, as we discussed, is going to end up having to win their next game in order to hold on to that number 4 spot. Cleveland has secured their spot, and they'll hold on to that number 5 spot. Buffalo at 6, and then Indianapolis at 7. This is our current standings right now. All of this is really still up for grabs. This is anybody's ball game when it comes to that 4th seed, 6th seed, 7th seed. So let's see how this all plays out. Okay, so let's move on over to the NFC now, because the NFC is just looking just as interesting right now. I think it's by no surprise that San Francisco has finally secured that number 1 seed. They've really been in the conversation. I know there's been a lot of talk between them and Dallas and Philadelphia, who Dallas and Philadelphia have kind of had their off times. And not to say that San Francisco didn't early on in the season, but San Francisco's really stepped themselves up. And I think that this number 1 overall seed was well deserved. And we'll see what happens in this postseason, but San Francisco's looking really strong right now. As far as the number 2, Dallas is currently holding on to that number 2 seed, and that is all still up for grabs, okay? Because as it stands right now, Dallas and Detroit are currently tied at 11-5. Dallas with obviously the higher ranking, holding on to that number 2 seed. But anything can still happen, and these guys are going to continue to hold on and play one more game, because anything can change here. And if Detroit was to win in Week 18 and Dallas lose, then Detroit would then overtake that number 2 seed, and they would hold on to it and bump Dallas down to number 3. As far as for number 4, Tampa Bay is currently holding on to that seed as it stands. So they're going to need one more victory, because they are still currently tied with New Orleans at 8-8. If New Orleans was to win and Tampa was to lose, Tampa would then be moved out of the playoff race, and New Orleans would take that number 4 seed. All of this is varying over a couple different things. So as it currently stands right now, Philadelphia is holding on to the 5 seed. They are tied with Dallas in the division, both with 11 and 5. Dallas holds the upper hand, which is why they're at the 2 and Philly's at the 5. If Philly was to win their Week 18 match and Dallas was to lose, then those roles would be reversed. Philly would then move up to the number 2, Dallas down to the number 5. I think it's safe to say currently right now that the Rams are going to hold on to this 6 seed, but that could end up changing, because if the Rams were to lose, then they have the possibility of being bumped down to the 7th seed. They have made it into the postseason, okay? So for all those Rams fans out there, congratulations. The Los Angeles Rams are going to be featured in the postseason, and you all should be very excited about that, because there were a lot of ifs, ands, or buts when it came to this Los Angeles Rams team, but they really did pull it off. Now, let's lead into the Green Bay Packers, the Seattle Seahawks, and the New Orleans Saints. Green Bay Packers with a flawless victory over the Minnesota Vikings 33-10. They look excellent right now, and they are currently holding now onto the number 7 seed after the Pittsburgh Steelers defeated the Seattle Seahawks, bumping them down, and with the Packers' victory last night, it bumped them up into the number 7 seed. Now the Packers win and they're in. They are going to be hosting a game at Lambeau Field versus the divisional rival Chicago Bears. Now, Chicago's been looking pretty decent, and they had an excellent performance yesterday against the Atlanta Falcons. So I'm not going to say that this is a total win game. I mean, yeah, in the past, the Packers have had Chicago's number. But as history has repeated itself, I remember we were in the same situation last year, win and you're in, against a Detroit Lions team who were fighting for absolutely nothing, but played with all the heart in the world and were able to come out victorious and knock us out of the playoffs. So we're really going to end up having to put everything we've got into this match. Playoff football started for us this week against the Minnesota Vikings. One loss and we are out. So we need to do everything in our power, and there are some banged up players, especially after that Minnesota game. Jaden Reed, who's kind of been in and out, questionable here, questionable there, also had another injury last night. Josh Myers suffered an injury towards the end of the game last night. And yeah, I mean, let's hope that we can get some of these guys in super healthy. Word has it, Christian Watson is doing everything in his power to be back for this game against the Chicago Bears. So let's hope for the best here. Packer fans have a lot to be excited about. But one thing I have to go ahead and just throw out there. With being a Packer fan, I have to just say this. I am more than ecstatic with the way that this season has turned out. If the Green Bay Packers somehow manage to make it to this postseason after defeating the Chicago Bears with a first-year quarterback, granted he sat behind Rodgers for 3 years, but still, nonetheless, first-year starter, and all of these rookie wide receivers, all of these first and second-year wide receivers and tight ends, this is almost going to be as good as winning the Super Bowl. And I'm saying almost, okay, because what's the end game goal? End game goal is to come out victorious. Of course, we want our Green Bay Packers to go all the way. But I don't think a lot of people out there thought that this is where the Packers were going to be. I did. I did early on in the season. I projected that the Packers were going to squeak their way into the playoffs. Granted, I think my record was more of a 10-7, 11-6, but nonetheless, here we are. Packers have the possibility of making it with a 7th seed at a 9-8 record. That just speaks volumes. And as far as for Jordan Love's performance, I think we can be more than happy in saying that the Green Bay Packers have found their quarterback for the future. His performance has been excellent. He looked great last night against the Minnesota Vikings, and I'm excited to just see what else he can end up putting together. So with that being said, our current NFC standings: San Francisco at 1, Dallas at 2, Detroit at 3, Tampa Bay at 4, Philly at 5, Los Angeles Rams at 6, and your Green Bay Packers with the number 7 seed. So if this playoff was to hold exactly the way that it currently stands, Green Bay Packers with the number 7 seed would go into Dallas and play against the Cowboys. The Rams would go into Detroit and play against the Lions. And the Eagles would go into Tampa Bay and play against the Buccaneers. That's all within the first wild card rounds. I'm excited. I mean, this all sounds pretty decent right here. The only one theoretically to me that just doesn't sound super decent and is probably going to be what is considered upset is going to be Philadelphia and Tampa Bay. My projection is that Philly should be able to take Tampa. Baker's been playing pretty decent, but nonetheless, Philadelphia has just obviously been in total competition between them and Dallas, and that division is just super strong. I would have to say that out of all my wild card games that I would end up picking, that's kind of a gimme game that Philly should end up overtaking Tampa. As far as the other ones are concerned, I'm always going to root for the Green Bay Packers, especially against the Dallas Cowboys team. But if we don't end up coming out victorious, I'm kind of expecting that to be the case. Anyways, that's all the time that we have for you today. Thank you so much for joining. We truly appreciate it. And if you haven't yet, please find and like us on all of our social media platforms at the WCC Grid Talk. You can find us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, and newly added Discord. You can find us on our Discord at the WCC Grid Talk, where we have a lot of interacting things for all of you listeners out there to come on in, join, meet other football fans, and just have a good time talking specifically now about this postseason. So football fans, I'll leave you with this. We may not like the cold, but certainly still rep the green and gold. Go Pack Go.